All right, so we're joined by a very special guest, Jackson Callaway. You might also know him as AggiesToday on Twitter. Jackson, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. I appreciate you guys having me. How y'all doing?
Doing well. I'm here with Coach Clete. He joined us for this little powwow we've got going on here. How you doing, Clete?
Yo, what's up? Good to be
So,
back.
yeah, Clete's about to get on our payroll here. It seems like so. Jackson, let's talk about kind of how you came up and what you're known for on Aggie Twitter and in college football in general. So you had the scoops. You were talking to recruits and freshmen. You knew where people were going at a very young age. I mean, when did you start doing this? Had to be like 15, 16?
I started younger than that. I remember I used to do like growing up. I always wanted to have like a fan page account. Like I started Instagram fan page accounts when I was like 10. My brother had been a graphic designer, and he did edits for like Kyler Murray and Austin Rivers and all that. And so growing up, I always kind of wanted the attention that he had. And so I remember I had like a Mavericks page that never really came up to much. I had a Cowboys page, and that went to like 15,000 on Instagram. And so I was talking to this one guy. He's not nearly as big now, but he was like Recruitology at the time. He was kind of like 70,000 followers on Instagram, massive page. It was like, hey, you want to do this? I need pages to kind of run this affiliation that I want to do. And I was like, well, not the biggest college football guy, but I'm interested in giving it a shot. I've always kind of that attachment to A&M that kind of originated from my grandparents, and then my uncle went there. So that was kind of what it was. And then I remember going to the 7 overtime LSU game. Was when it all kind of changed for me. I'd probably had the page for a year or two before that, and kind of just wanted to kind of go experience it for myself because really I'd never been down there before. And I remember coming out of that game and being like, this is something completely different that I've never experienced before. And I just remember completely, like the next day I was like, I think I want to give up on doing this professional football side of things and going to the college football side of things. So that's kind of where it started. And I mean, I probably made that page on Instagram. I probably started out when I was about 14 or 15.
Wow, that's sick. Where let me ask you, where are you originally from?
I'm
Where are
from
you?
Rockville, just a
Rockville?
little bit
Okay.
outside of Dallas. So
Gotcha. I'm in Dallas now, so that's cool. Um, where did you sit for the 7 overtime game?
ooh, yeah. So we had my grandparents have had season tickets for probably 20, 25 years. And so we were in the end zone. What side is that? It's escaping my mind, but where we run out the tunnel, we were
Yeah.
really like right above that to the left, probably 3 sections. So we had really good seats.
Oh yeah.
And we used to have those, and then kind of COVID happened, so we had to back out. But those are some of the best seats I've ever had.
Yeah, no, that's
That's
sweet.
awesome.
I'm assuming you rushed the field as well. It's
Uh oh,
probably a given.
I can't say I did. Fun fact that I won't tell many people about that game. We walked out of the stadium when Kellen Mond threw the pick, and we thought it was over,
Oh,
and they didn't let us back in.
Oh,
They didn't
don't.
let
and
us
that
back in.
whole knee
How are
thing,
you
yeah.
saying this out loud?
Yeah,
My
I don't tell a
God.
whole lot of people that, but I mean, if you ask, I got to be honest. So
Well, now we have that on you forever.
yeah,
That's unfortunate. Well, anyways, let's kind of talk about. I guess you was there any moment where you DM'd a player or you had some type of post blow up where you were like, oh shit, like this is getting legit now. Like I might have to kind of do something with it.
yeah. I think I'm trying to remember the exact situation it was, but I remember I was kind of just like an Instagram guy. I didn't ever really venture out in anything else. At the time, I was still really, I mean, I was probably like 14, 15 years old. And I remember, I think what really kind of started it more than anything was that looking at it now, it's probably not the biggest brag, but at the time, Damon Demas out of high school was the guy. Like that was what everyone had. That's the guy that everyone had their eyes on.
Oh yeah.
And so I remember when I was really like we would talk every day. We played video games every day. I mean, we were pretty close. He would tell me when guys were committing. I mean, he was kind of my source at the time.
So you guys were
Um,
like on Xbox Live, like
oh yeah, oh
microphones, like
yeah.
what games were
I
you all
remember a
playing?
night when I was like 14 years old, and I was on. I was playing like I don't remember like Minecraft with Damon Demas and Anthony Hines. I think was on there as well. And at the time, I was like, Anthony Hines, pff, I'm on with Damon Demas. But like looking at it now, it's like,
Oh
what
yeah.
in the world?
Yeah.
But I think it was, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember my dad coming into my room right after I had done a live stream with Damon Demas, and he was kind of talking about Haynes King, because at the time, Arkansas and Tennessee were still after Haynes King a lot. And he was kind of giving hints that he was coming to A&M. I remember my dad coming in and showing me all these threads on this weird website I'd never heard before called TexAgs. And so I was like, wow, this is kind of like, it's kind of getting a little serious. I remember just from there, skyrocketing from there on. And that kind of, I will always kind of owe something to Damon for that, because I was at a few hundred followers for the longest time. And then all of a sudden he comes in and I start blowing up. I'm on, Instagram live streams with recruits every single night. And obviously that kind of faded out as it went because, those conversations kind of trended to be more private after that.
Yeah.
But, I will always kind of owe something to him because I think that he kind of brought me that initial exposure that I don't think I would have gotten otherwise.
Yeah, so I actually we were talking about this a little bit before, but I remember. So that was like my first or second year, 2018, 2019, when we were recruiting Damon, and kind of when you started getting Aggies Today started getting pretty prevalent into the recruiting world. And so I remember actually hopping on those Instagram lives and like listening to what you said because I'd get questions from coaches that I was working with, like, dude, who is this guy? Like, how is he in the know? Like all those kind of things. And so my question is, what was kind of, I guess outside of Demond or even with Demond Demas, what was kind of the method to the madness of how would you approach these recruits? Like, did you have people who you knew who knew them, or what did kind of that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny looking back now because I don't know, I don't know how it worked. Because now it's so much different than when I was younger. Whenever I was younger, I was so scared of talking to adults, and my way to kind of get to those adults and the coaches or whatever it was through the players. And so looking back now, I'm not sure how it worked, but I didn't talk to anybody outside like current players, current recruits, and then they'd have connections. And then all of a sudden I would end up in these group chats with Damon Demas and Jalen Milroe and LJ Johnson and Ruben Fobb. Like I'm in these group chats with like 70 recruits out of nowhere. And everyone's like, who's this guy? I'm like, oh, he's Jackson Aggies Today. And it was so, I don't understand how it worked, but I think any other class, if I'd started at any other time, I just don't think it would have worked. And it's kind of evolved to where now I've kind of realized there's a lot more to it than talking to the recruits. I mean, now it's 7-on-7 coaches, high school coaches, parents of the team that they're playing for. It's way more difficult in a way than it used to be. But I definitely think that the early going, it was really just like talking to those recruits and getting a consistent relationship with those guys that really kind of carried me through that beginning.
Yeah, no, I remember so my dad was a high school football coach, and I remember it used to be like old school days, like, you would have you have a head coach or a coordinator, whoever, come into his office and, hey, I'm recruiting this guy. And so everything kind of ran through the head coach or his position coach in high school. But no, like once I kind of got into, once Jimbo and I got hired into, at A&M, you kind of started seeing that trend start to move as he started getting more towards the transfer portal or that like shift to NIL and all that kind of stuff, where it went from going through the high school coach or whoever to these like these trainers. And so like footworking was one. And so like you were kind of like another avenue where it was kind of new to everybody. And that was kind of the beginning of it. And so you kind of started out in an era where everything was kind of shifting. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, it was very interesting because I remember at the time, like Footwork Geek at the time, that was the guy I talked to very frequently.
Oh, yeah.
This was Demas. And I also kind of forgot about this. Like I would talk to, at the time, there were coaches on the team with kids my age, and I talked to those kids all the time. Like during his tenure at A&M, Ethan Fisher was probably one of the guys that helped me out the most, oddly enough. Like we got Max Johnson. I remember having a conversation with Ethan. He was like, yeah, man, I mean, Keishon Boutte, what do you think about Keishon Boutte? And I'm like, Keishon Boutte, at the time, he was like one of the hottest receivers in college football. Obviously, he died off towards the end of his career at LSU, but just stuff like that. Like it was always coaches' kids are always those were always some of the guys, and I talk to all of them still now to this day. But it was. And now in my head, it's like, how did that work? Like, how did I get all that information from these guys that just have such limited information? It was kind of crazy.
So how, like, I understand that this kind of just grew like wildfire for you. Like what was the benefit to the players? And I'm not trying to say that there wasn't, but like, was it that you were posting graphics? Was it the exposure for them? Like, what were they trying to get out of that relationship?
That's kind of been something I've thought about as I've kind of grown now to where I'm at. Obviously, I think now there's a little bit more of a bono, of a pro bono there for them, is that they kind of get that exposure from my Twitter page, where not a lot of recruits have a large following on Twitter. Instagram's a completely different story, where I think whenever I was younger, all I could offer was really exposure, and even then, I didn't have a whole lot for a long time. I mean, I was at probably 5,000-7,000 when this was all happening. I really think it was probably just the relationships and just kind of that being, everyone's telling, this kid what's happening, and it's kind of, following a trend type thing, because really I didn't have much to offer. At the other time, there would be recruiting websites offering them this and that and ranking boosts or whatever. I couldn't do any of that. So I think for me, it was just straight relationship based.
So you were becoming like the Adam Schefter of high school kids.
For a little bit, yeah. I mean, it was so weird too, because I'd be talking to dudes who aren't even considering A&M, and then I'd be talking to these other guys who are helping me out with I'd text some Clemson page like, hey, this guy's about to come to Clemson, and then he'd help me out with some other guys as well. So that kind of grew into a networking thing out of nowhere.
So did you ever were you ever able to monetize it in any way?
No, not really. I mean, I started doing the Patreon probably 2 or so years ago, but even then, I think if I I started when I was much younger, I think I would have made, at 14, I probably would have been making 2, 3, maybe even 4,000 a month. Somewhere similar to where I am now, because at that time that was when I was just posting stuff on Twitter for everyone to see. Like, no one had to pay to get my information that I was sharing. It's literally just out there in the internet. But what came with that was also a 14-year-old who has all this knowledge that really, looking back, had a crazy kind of like a ego thing. And, I'm just kind of just like saying things, letting it fly, and looking back, it's awful to look back on, because even today, I see new tweets that I've posted. I'm like, oh my gosh, how did people put up with this? But yeah, I mean, it was kind of crazy.
So tell me this. So in this, I don't know if you'd say, like, you can call it a fan page, but I would kind of consider it more than that, because you think of a fan page or something, you think of just like a random Twitter account, and that's not really what you are. But have you noticed, I guess, since you're in your growth for the past several years, are there other schools who have people like AggiesToday that have Twitter accounts like that? And like, what does that ecosystem look like, just through your networking and everything that you've kind of grown to know over the past however many years it's been?
Yeah, I think, every school obviously has their, Texags or, whatever it is. But I think there's very few that kind of have that young kid that, is the same age as the recruits. And I don't know kind of what it is anymore, because I've kind of moved out of that as I've tried to go in a more professional route, or I've even wanted to enter the coaching side of things and do whatever it takes to get into that. But I remember, like, even when I was much younger, I remember there being a group chat of probably 15 kids that ran similar pages to AggiesToday, where you don't know their identity, but they're a younger guy. And I remember I can't remember a whole lot of guys in that, but Hayes Fawcett was one of them. I mean, Hayes Fawcett's a guy that I grew with forever. I mean, I remember talking to him when he was at like 2,000 followers, and we were all like in this group chat, hype each other up. We're all the coolest guys in the world. We're teenagers with all this information, and then obviously don't talk to any of them anymore. I mean, Hayes Fawcett on occasion, but it's kind of crazy to look back at, because I don't know. I'm very curious where a lot of them are at now, just because I don't. Instagram's kind of done away for me. I've been banned on there twice, so yeah.
Do you think Hayes Fawcett hates the Aggies?
I used to not believe it. I kind of believe it a little bit, but I think it's more so the engagement he gets out of it. I think
he knows.
Anyone who does that, there's so many. LSU in particular has a lot of people who do that on Twitter, where it's like, engagement baiting A&M fans because you know you're going to get it.
We
You
do
know
that
you're
with
going to get it.
Texas.
A&M has all of a sudden become this hated team that everyone despises, and that it hasn't always been that way. I feel like it really started with sliced bread because I remember before then, everyone was cool with A&M. Everyone loved A&M. It's the SEC team that upsets BEM every once in a while. And now it's just, everyone hates A&M. They pay players, this, that, weird cult.
We got exposed with a lot of once people started to realize some of the weirdness that comes out of A&M, we got shit on for that, and we were always kind of falling short of expectations. So it was one of those things too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we love to do that with Texas, right? Like we are always going after them, and their fans are too easy. It spreads like wildfire. It's pretty insane to watch, and these people are unbearable to deal with as well. But I get it. Cool. Well, what is like your craziest or funniest interaction with a recruit? Like maybe a story that you feel comfortable sharing.
With a recruit is interesting.
Or anyone like that you through the account.
There's been some interesting things. I remember at the time I was really close. There was one, I can't remember what class this was. It may have been 2020. Monkel Goodwin and Donovan McMillan were two guys who were going after pretty hard. And I remember being at a game with one of them. I'm pretty sure it was Monkel. And we were walking through Kyle Field, and someone wanted to come take a picture with Aggies Today and gave Monkel Goodwin, a 4-star defensive end that's like top 150 in the league, the phone to take a picture with Aggies Today. And that was hilarious. But that's probably the only one I really have.
Okay. Well,
That's hilarious.
Do you think that this is going to be like something you try to keep up long term?
It's interesting. There's been times where I kind of doubt it, and then other times I'm like wanting to kind of pursue something with it. I've kind of been talking to some coaches, wanting to kind of get into the coaching side of things. Not so much the position coach. Like I would love to be like a recruiting coordinator one day and kind of have that be what I do, because that's the side of things I love. I love recruiting. I love building relationships. I love doing all that. I don't think I'd be the greatest coach. Quit football when I was a freshman in high school, so that's probably not my avenue. But I mean, there's been times where I'm like, I'm gonna have to give this up one day, but I don't see how I could. I really enjoy doing it, and I don't know, man. I think taking a step back one day and kind of just like not being able to do what I do now and have the following that I have and the interactions that I have, I think that'd be really tough on me to have.
For sure. So let's bring it back to the Aggies then. Maybe Clete will get you a job after we hop off the report. So Aggies obviously coming off huge win at Florida. Marcel Reed stepped in for Connor Wigman and looked incredible. Defense looked really good. Florida definitely really bad team. I think we can all agree. Billy Napier's on his way out. What is the vibe? I mean, I don't know if you're talking to anybody on the team right now. Is there any vibe or whispers about this quarterback situation that we have in front of us?
I wouldn't say in particular to the quarterback room. I think, before going into the Florida game, I think they knew that that's a game they would win. I don't think that there was ever a doubt about that. I think going into the game, there was a little bit of uneasiness because, everyone sees what Marcel does at practice, but seeing it in a game is entirely different. I had a lot of players, especially during, camp, talk to me about how they liked Marcel a lot, but, Weigman, it just has that it factor. And some people doubted that with Marcel, especially in the passing game. But I don't think, like, normally when you have this quarterback battle, midseason controversy, there's a lot of locker room talk. I don't get that feel right now. I mean, I haven't talked to anyone that kind of gives that feel about that battle.
So that's something that's very that's something that I think we would have seen in the past years. And I mean, AgJack can tell you, I'm a big Elko guy. Obviously, I work for him, but I think that's something that he's kind of eliminates is a lot of that drama, and I think that's why you're seeing that, with you talking with some of the players. So that's good. That's good. I think that's the ultimate net positive. A lot of people don't realize, like, Marcel was a pretty highly recruited like guy out of, and you maybe can touch on that. I know like Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin was going after him. I know that one was kind of a big one, but what was he like the number 4 dual rank or dual threat
He was
quarterback
up
coming
there.
out like up there?
I can't remember exactly what he was ranked, but I remember that being a guy that Lane Kiffin was huge on, and that was a battle to get him out of that pledge to Ole Miss. I know the family played a big factor in that, but I know that was a guy that Lane Kiffin really liked. And I think, during that process, it was kind of, you have Connor Weigman. Who cares what quarterback you get this class? So kind of that feeling for me to where we already have our guy. I don't really care who we get. But looking back, I mean, when you get a quarterback that Lane Kiffin wants that bad, you kind of have a feeling he's going to be pretty good. And I wish I kind of appreciated that more. But that was looking back at what Jimbo did. I think that's probably one of the things that we appreciate the most was him getting Marcel Reed and leaving that quarterback room in a really good situation, especially with Jalen Henderson, who they wouldn't have gotten without Bobby Petrino.
Right.
Jackson, I got to applaud you for introducing a new way to say our quarterback's name. We've struggled with it for the past 3 years. Wigman, and now Weigman.
I don't know why I say Weigman. I'm positive it's Wegman, but it goes through my head and it just doesn't. I just can't say it.
It might be easier to just say Marcel Reed.
It may be.
I'm not jumping ship. I want the best for the team. I think Connor's been hurt all year, but regardless of that, obviously we're playing Bowling Green this week. Should be, an easy matchup. I don't think Connor has to play. He's listed as the number 1 quarterback on the depth chart right now. I think it'd be stupid to play him. What does Marcel have to do to cause even more of a controversy going into the Arkansas game the following week?
Man, for me, my biggest thing this week is kind of expanding on what you did last week. I think last week, looking back at I've looked back a little bit to that Florida game. I still got to look a little bit more. But to me, looking at how Colin Klein called the offense in the first half particularly, I don't think he made it easy on Marcel Reed at all. Typically, with these young quarterbacks, you're going to see a lot of play act. We ran like 3 snaps of play action the entire first half. I think he was challenged with a lot of what he did. He performed really well. I don't know the exact grade, but Pro Football Focus ranked him as one of the best quarterbacks against the blitz this year so far with that performance. And that's typically what you want to do against a young quarterback. Blitz, blitz, blitz. He was phenomenal against it. He did a great job of managing the game. I think he played very mistake-free. I think there were a few balls that could have been a little closer. I think that one, there was a hitch at one point that was almost picked off by Jason Marshall, I believe. And that was probably the only mistakes he's made all game, just kind of looking at it from the broadcast. But I think just building on that and kind of really testing the limits. We heard a lot about, Marcel Reed's arm and the limitations and inconsistencies he may have. I think this is probably a game that you want to try that out. I think Bowling Green's a solid team. They played Penn State really well. I think that was a week or 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. They have a really good offense. And so I think that defense can shut it down. And if you're able to test the limitations of Marcel Reed's arm, and I think if you can figure out exactly what he can and cannot do, you're feeling pretty good about your odds going into Arkansas.
Yeah, Coach Clete actually grinded the film this week, so this is a perfect opportunity to get his take, see if he has similar response to you. Clete, I know you were sending us clips getting all excited about Colin Klein and some of the stuff that Marcel did. What did you see out there?
Yeah, no, so I do agree with what you said. Just touch on Bowling Green real quick. I think you want to obviously get out there, go do what you got to do, get ahead to where you can kind of open it up a little bit. I do think that's a good idea to kind of let him see what he can do, start calling some things to where he really has to read a defense and make some big time throws, things of that nature, just to kind of test those limitations like you were saying. But no, the Florida game, I mean, it's so easy to go back and be Monday morning quarterback. But no, I mean, I thought he did, he had a hell of a game. We all saw that. Few things that he did clearly miss. I think the one that you were talking about where he, almost threw a pick or hit the Florida guy right in his chest, that was partially on Moose, but also at the same time he had it's always easy to go and look at the all 22 and say, oh, he should have went here. This guy's wide open, but you don't know what his reads are
Right.
per Collins' scheme. So you can say, those couple guys are open, but you don't really know. You could see some throws that he missed, or that you would think he missed, just based off what you're looking off of, PFF. But I think Connor probably would have done the same thing. And I think that says a lot about both of them, is that they both need to continue to progress. You see the big time quarterbacks in college football right now. They're not missing a lot of those. They may have a couple of games, but ultimately we just have to continue to grow and get better in the quarterback room for us to actually be a championship contending team, and to kind of run the table. But ultimately, I think it was fine. If he's going to be the guy going forward, what I want to see them kind of dial back a little bit is some of the quarterback runs. I mean, the guy's a $180, and that's kind of scary. If you're saying he's a guy and then you're running quarterback powers and he's going up against a linebacker and getting his head knocked off by a safety, like that's not a good combo to keep him long term. That's something I'd like to see. But one more point is I do think it kind of opened up Klein's playbook a little bit, because of, you go back and look at Kansas State, they always had a quarterback that could run a little bit. And so having that kind of versatility, I think, helped him a little bit. Also, Connor can run. That's something that, Marcel's obviously elusive, but Connor can also move. And you saw that a little bit against McNeese. And I just think we need to, throw Notre Dame out. Just that sucked. But that was kind of, my ultimate take from all that.
I'm not a proponent of a 2 quarterback system ever. I think it's always the worst thing ever. But I think what we're coming out of at the very least is like the team feels together. It doesn't feel like, some guys are going to lean towards Marcel, some guys are going to lean towards Connor, like you've said. I think that everyone's just excited that, hey, we might have 2 talented quarterbacks here and we could get the best out of both of them throughout games. So there might be a package for Marcel or whatever, but you can confidently, you can feel pretty confident about him going in there, throwing the ball, running the ball, and giving Connor a break if Connor, if anything's going on with his shoulder, whatever it may be.
100%. That's kind of what I said in the post game was, it's a good problem to have. We have 2 quarterbacks that are good. We know they're good, and it's a good problem to have when you have 2 quarterbacks that you're kind of, who do we go with? What I don't want to see our fans do is, hey, if Connor rolls out there against Arkansas, like, boos or whatever, like just uproar about that, because I think we have to, put some faith in Elko and Klein to know, hey, they are watching thousands and thousands of clips every day over the past however many months of these 2 quarterbacks, and what you're seeing is, you got to put some trust in them. So that's something I don't want to see.
We'll get to that, but I mean, think about it. If we roll Bowling Green and Marcel plays really well again, Connor's going to have to come out in that Arkansas game and play well early on, or else if they sputter a little bit, it's going to be like, ooh, a little shaky. Cool. Well, let's save the rest of the game conversation for the rest of the podcast. But Jackson, are there any notable freshmen that you're talking to that, they were guys that got recruited that you had spoken to during that process that are starting to kind of carve out a role on this team, and you're seeing that come out?
Yeah, I mean, you said freshmen, but I might go a little bit more in sophomores as well, and redshirt guys, because I think really you've started to see an emergence from some players that going into the season I probably wouldn't have expected it, or as much as it is. Like a guy like Rylan Kennedy was a guy I've been huge on forever. Ever since we started him out of high school, I've been a big guy on Rylan Kennedy. I thought his pass rush ability was phenomenal. I think him and Cassius Howell were awesome additions to the team. I think you have a guy like Malik Silla who plays very similar to them. But I think Rylan Kennedy, I think he's a phenomenal athlete. He's very raw. Only played 1 year of football in high school. But you've kind of seen him emerge as one of the top players in the defense overall. He's not a freshman, he may be a redshirt sophomore, but Marcus Ratcliffe, the transfer from San Diego State, he has been one of the best players on this team, and he has
Yes.
been phenomenal.
Yes.
Phenomenal.
Yes. He
Yeah.
flashes big time on film. I mean, you can see him, but like that dude, he can play.
I think, and I mean, we kind of heard about it a little from Elko, and I was kind of curious how much he'd play because you kind of heard a lot about Dalton Brooks. You knew Dalton Brooks and Bryce Henderson would be the guys. I thought Trey Jones would kind of be that third guy. But Ratcliffe has very quickly emerged as a guy who I think is as valuable as anybody in that secondary. I think Will Lee's been phenomenal as well. I don't think I can, talk without mentioning him. I know we're talking about younger guys, but he's a guy I really like. I think Javon Thomas has, improved a lot since last year. I'm trying to think freshman, man. He's not a fresh. I think he's a redshirt freshman this year. But Shanahan as well, when given the opportunity. I know there's a lot of drama about his arrest a week ago, but when he was given an opportunity, he's looked really good, in my opinion.
Yeah, dude, Ratcliffe is something special. He has some limitations, just that I've seen, just turning and running with guys. But like we got to keep Dalton Brooks in the game. That kind of hinders it a little bit.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts? Yeah, what's your thoughts on Bussy, Busey, whatever, however you want to call it?
I said going into the McNeese week of preparation that we needed to give him more opportunities other than the jet sweeps that we do, like probably 4 or 5 times a game at minimum. I would really like to see him feature more on the offense. I don't think it's ever good to force feed a player, especially a young player, the ball, and kind of just rely on him to make a play for himself. But I really do think that he's a guy that's ready for the moment in a big game. I don't worry about his limitations all that much, to be completely honest. I think his ceiling is at DB, but I think right now he's one of the better options at receiver or just a playmaker on offense overall. I think he's a guy that you need to get the ball to a little bit more. I know they've kind of given him the green light to kind of do whatever he wants to special teams. We haven't seen a whole lot from him on special teams quite yet, but I think it's just a matter of time before he starts to break out on that scene.
Yeah, I feel like they've got to get him the ball in space a little bit more. They've just kind of run him up the middle a couple times. They've done a couple jet sweeps. It feels like I don't know, he's got kind of side to side happy feet on a lot of these plays. Like he's running in the backs of guys and tripping over himself. But once he gets it, he's going to explode.
Yeah, I think he's going to have like one of those. There's going to be one game where he just breaks out. It's coming. I can feel it. It's like a ticking time bomb to when he like fully arrives on the scene. But I'm very high on him. I told them, Jackson, that I think he's like the next Anais. Like that's kind of the player I think he is.
He's really talented both ways, and I was very interested to see how he was utilized this year. Because again, like I said a second ago, I think his ceiling is at corner, but that corner room is so deep. I don't think he would play a whole lot at corner, and so I like bringing him onto the offense and using that playmaking ability.
Right.
But like y'all said, I think open space. We got to get him some more opportunities. Kind of give a different look when giving him the ball because I feel like you kind of have an idea of when he's going to get the ball when he's on the field.
For sure. Okay, well, let's move into the future. What do you got cooking as far as recruits? Are you bringing anybody to the table for us in College Station?
Man, I haven't been to many high school games yet. I have a lot of really good games in my area. I'm from Rockwell, as I was saying earlier. My high school is now in a district with Forney, and that's going to be an interesting game. Incredible running back Osborne, one of the top in the country next year. Kelvin Riggins is a guy that I think is awesome. Size-wise, he's probably closer to being maxed out. I think he put a little bit more weight on, but that's a guy I like a lot. I think there's a very high floor with Riggins. And another player in my district that I really want to go see is Lamont Rogers, the Missouri Pledge, top 50 guy. Very kind of still raw from what I've kind of seen. I think he is the most physical tackle you will see in this cycle. And in my opinion, going from if you're taking a guy off the ceiling, I would take him over the 2 higher rated tackles in the state right now, and it being Haywood and Fasusi. I think that's a guy who, when it's all said and done, I think right now, as it stands right now, I think that's a guy who could very well sign at the Aggies. So that's one guy I'm definitely keeping an eye on. I think Looking in the state, there's a lot of options. I really like Dylan McCutcheon, the FSU commit. I think right now everyone's kind of eyeing that Seminoles class right now and kind of seeing what can I get out of that. I think that's a guy who the Aggies could really easily go get. I think that they need another spark plug in that receivers class. I think Tristan Norman's had a great senior year so far. That's a guy that I wasn't super high on when he committed originally, but this year he's looked phenomenal. Kelson Johnson has looked, again, as advertised. I think he is as elusive. He's a jukebox. He's phenomenal. I'm a big Kelson Johnson guy. I think Dalen McCutcheon brings aspects of his game while also being a little bit better of a receiver than Johnson.
I hope we listen to this podcast in like 6 years, because I didn't know any of the names you just said. And we're just like, holy shit, Jackson was just ripping off like NFL studs left and right. But that's awesome, though. So one guy I do know who's supposed to be an absolute dog coming into A&M, Husan, I don't know how to say his name, Husan Longstreet.
Oh, yeah.
You got anything on this guy?
Man, I will tell you, I will be one of the first people to tell you, and probably one of the more bold dudes in saying it. I really am confident in him being one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the country. This is a really good quarterback class, but the way the ball comes out of his hand is when it comes out of his hand, it is flying. He has probably the quickest release out of anybody. I think he kind of has that it factor when passing the ball. His play style is interesting. I think he has a running ability, but it's not one that you can really game plan around. I think it's just one that's a tool for him to use. I think he can extend plays. I think that's something that's very often overlooked. I think last year when we got Miles O'Neill, that was his only weakness, is that we don't know the athletic ability, the mobility. Can he extend plays? With Husan Longstreet, I don't think there's really a question about any of his tools. I think it's, looking again at the health, we know he had an injury coming into the season. I think got dinged up pretty recently again, but it's not anything long-term again. I'm very big on Husan. I don't have any doubts at all, actually, about him going anywhere else. I think he's pretty locked into the Aggies.
Good. Sounds like you just described Patrick Mahomes.
Hey, question for you. What are you hearing as far as, I don't know if there is, I know there's probably a little bit, but what are you hearing about Elko, the staff, how they're recruiting, positive, negatives, just kind of what are you hearing out there in the streets?
Yeah, I've been very fascinated with their approach, especially to NIL. I think it's very intriguing. I mean, I think we kind of saw it in the portal a little bit. I think, had they had the entire staff filled out before the portal opened, I think you would have a very different portal class. I think there'd be a little, I think you'd probably trim the fat a little bit on that class. How to take some guys depth-wise. But their ability to recruit the high-end talent through the portal is unquestionable. I think Scorton was a phenomenal addition. I think Howell was a phenomenal addition. And they were able to get that edge from Marshall, who I was a big fan of, but ended up not staying with the Aggies because he didn't think they'd be getting Howell. So that didn't work out. But I think in the portal, they're very good. High school recruiting is where it's very fascinating to me. They've been very strategic with their NIL funds. There was a guy earlier this year that was kind of, head and head with another guy at his position, probably the top 2 players on the Aggies board at the position, and he was asking for 150% of what the other guy was asking, when in reality they think, whatever, about the second guy. And so I think they've been a little bit better on not just kind of saying, okay, you're a good player, whatever, we'll give you what you want, compared to Jimbo, to where, it was, you want that much money, they're offering less, we'll just offer more. And
right.
That's how it was. And so I think now it's also interesting to me because I remember talking to a coach about the exact situation, them saying, we're not going to do that, especially at this position, when we know the guys we have at the position, and in the future, it doesn't line up. They're not going to pay, the highest paid player isn't going to be your quarterback 2 straight classes. They're going to space it out, and they have designated kind of limitations for NIL at each position because they know what they have going forward and what they're all sent to afford in the free agency of transfer portal.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's exactly how Elko, I think, approaches things, is like you don't want to get lost in the weeds of, hey, this guy is a highly sought after recruit. He's wanting a bunch of money in NIL. I think he's kind of like, look, if you're just bag chasing, go somewhere else. Like we can find a player that is equally as talented, and not that he doesn't want players to get what they deserve, but it's like you need to come to A&M to come and play football and grow and develop, and then go to the NFL. So no, that's when you said that, that was kind of something that I can absolutely see that. And that dude is very strategic, and just you know, he doesn't let anything just kind of slide by. It's very thought out, and how he approaches that and the transfer portal.
We're definitely in good hands. So, Jaxson, thanks again for joining us. I got two more questions for you, real quick ones. First one, and you made me think of this a couple minutes ago. Before NIL came into play, what was the craziest thing that you heard a recruit getting offered, or the craziest thing that happened to a recruit on a visit? And if you want to get someone in trouble, let's create some headlines here.
Dude, there's a few coaches that aren't necessarily in the loop. Like Dan Mullen definitely had some stuff that he could have gotten canned for. Lincoln Riley obviously is a guy that's very frequent with that. I think really I don't have any numbers or any proof to back up the numbers that I think it is. But I remember right after signing, talking to Demas, and he was telling me some numbers, which I don't remember exactly what they are now, and I don't have the proof because my page was deleted. But I remember hearing about some pretty crazy numbers that he was being told from Oklahoma and Florida pretty shortly after signing that he could have had. And that I remember that kind of like an eye-opening moment, because that when you're that young and I was hearing that, I was like, there's no chance. But now it's like there's no doubt that probably happened.
7 figures?
Close. I don't think it was 7 figures, but I think the numbers since NIL have just completely jumped because there's more parties involved.
Right.
So I think it's got a completely different ballgame than what it used to be. But yeah.
Cool. Last question I have for you. So you seem to be an amateur scout of sorts. I'm going to ask you to create a scouting report for AgKnocks as an up-and-coming social media platform. Lay it on me. I'm putting you on the spot here.
Amateur scout is a little generous. I'll say the personnel is phenomenal.
Good start.
The hospitality is phenomenal. The content is phenomenal. I think there's not much that y'all are leaving to be desired. I don't understand why no one would be tuning in on a very frequent basis.
All right, he just Krispy Kremed us. Well, any advice for us as an up-and-coming social media platform to kind of we want to emulate what you're doing. We want to get to your level of followers and engagement.
Oh man, that's very kind. The only thing that I would say is that I think anyone can really grow at a steady pace. I don't know how quick, it'll go for everybody, but I think if you stay very consistent on social media and you're consistently posting out content that people would like to see, and not so much like lazy slop that you're just like, oh, I have to post today, whatever. Especially building relationships, even if it's not in A&M. I think I benefited a lot off of, when I was younger, knowing other team guys who covered the work, and they'd share my stuff whenever it's related to their school. I think just having stuff like that to where you have such a larger reach, I think always expanding your reach is the biggest thing.
I hope you heard that, Tom Ag and Billy Big Shot and Shrek and Cowdog. Same shit I've been saying. All right, well, thanks, Jaxson.
Of course.
Really appreciate you coming on. This was a lot of fun. You're welcome anytime. We'd love to do more stuff with you, and we love what you do online. So keep killing it, man.
I appreciate it. I love being here. It's always fun, and I will definitely be back for you guys.
Sweet. Love to hear that. Thanks, buddy.
Of course.
All right. That should have stopped the recording. Oh, is it still going?
Still going.